Here's the thing, we are in the thick of it, awards season. And as we approach Christmas, now's the time that the last of the awards contenders reach theaters. We have a place on the ForReel website where you can read and watch content about all of the awards contenders that our team has covered so far. I'll place the link in the description below. So ahead of Christmas, I want to cover a few more titles you'll want to know about this season right here on Real Buzzed. Before we get into it, for those of you who don't know my rating system, it goes like this. I've identified 5 aspects of a film that matter to me: acting and casting, visual effects and editing, story and message, entertainment value, music score and soundtrack, and an additional category for personal preference. Because that arbitrary sense of whether I enjoyed a movie or not is worth considering too. For each of these categories, I assign a value of 0, 1, or 2. The sum total of these values lands the final rating of the film on this scale. For each film in this video, I'll discuss my thoughts on each category and assign the 0, 1, or 2 rating, and at the end of each review, we'll see where the final score of the film lands, and you will have had every step of my thought process along the way. Got it? Good. You know, one of the reviews I have lined up for this episode is about a prolific musician who wrote a very popular song called "Knocking on Heaven's Door." Which means there is literally no better time for me to feature one of these bottles on Real Buzzed. Today, I'm sipping on Heaven's Door from the Decade series and reviewing the films The Brutalist, Nickel Boys, and Nosferatu with a rapid review of A Complete Unknown. Cheers. I'm not going to lie, when I first approached The Brutalist at TIFF, I was incredibly apprehensive. A 3-hour and 20-minute long slow burn drama at the end of a 4-movie day, 7 days into a very busy festival. I'm telling you, I was convinced I was going to fall asleep on this movie. But let me explain to you all the reasons why I didn't and couldn't. This is my review of The Brutalist. Escaping post-war Europe, visionary architect László Toth arrives in America to rebuild his life, his work, and his marriage to his wife, Erzsébet, after being forced apart during wartime by shifting borders and regimes. On his own in a strange new country, László settles in Pennsylvania, where the wealthy and prominent industrialist Harrison Lee Van Buren recognizes his talent for building. But power and legacy come at a heavy cost. The Brutalist unfolds in 2 halves, separated by an intermission. The first half of the film follows László as he gets his footing in America and eventually lands the ambitious architecture project at the center of the story, essentially the rise of László Toth. The second half chronicles the challenges he encounters with his career, his relationships, and his personal struggles that makes his situation even more precarious. Ultimately, the fall of László Toth. In these 2 halves, the script does an incredible job getting us acquainted with the characters in this story, their motivations, their intentions, and, most importantly, the flaws that are naturally integrated into each of them. But at the core of the story is an immigrant's struggle to join a society that hates him for his foreign background despite his skill and education level. And I think this is something the script really excels at, making backhanded comments and racist behavior feel as sharp of a jab to the audience as it is to the artist who has to tolerate the people tolerating him. I spent so much of this movie just soaking in the highs and lows of the story, and that really helped that 3 hours and 20 minutes just fly by. Story and themes gets a 2 out of 2. I'm going to lump cinematography into this category because how this film looks contributes so much to what makes it such a fantastic cinematic experience. The Brutalist was filmed entirely on VistaVision, something that hasn't been done in over 20 years. It's a special format that really captures a lot in the filming frame, and it absolutely makes many aspects of the film just pop. In the description, I'll leave a link to a good explanation on the significance of VistaVision in the history of cinema. It's actually really fascinating to learn about. It's because of this VistaVision technology that seeing the film in 70mm is something entirely worth going out of your way to seek out. But in addition to the look of the film, how it's filmed is also stunning. All of these creative choices really contribute to making the film look and feel epic. This again makes the 3 hours and 20 minutes just fly by. Visual effects and editing gets a 2. This movie is chock full of award-worthy performances. Adrien Brody is so natural at embodying all of the character traits of László, which is crucial for fully buying into the character and his plights for the duration of the film. Felicity Jones enters the story in the second half of the film playing László's wife, Erzsébet. And when she arrives, she makes a massive impact, being endearing and soft-spoken in tender sequences, but also tackling bold and assertive opportunities perfectly in the more dramatic scenes. When Jones is given a moment to shine, she takes full advantage of it. And then there's Guy Pearce playing Harrison Van Buren, who is essential to the telling of this story, but so fiendish. Pearce's performance captures how overtly despicable this character is, but in a way that's minimized. We know and feel how egregious the things he says and does are, but it's just second nature to a person like him. Taking on this kind of character can't be easy, but Pearce plays this character perfectly. As we make our way to more and more prominent award shows, it would make me entirely happy to see any of these actors win awards for their performances. Everyone's fantastic, and it's performances like these that also really helps make a 3-hour and 20-minute film just fly by. Acting and casting gets a 2. And y'all, my goodness, the score is gorgeous. This score is so striking, tactfully employing epic overtures in certain segments of the film while offering more tender piano pieces in other segments. Composer Daniel Blumberg is so exceptional at drumming up rousing emotions with music that is inspiring, uplifting, occasionally chaotic, and sometimes even haunting. Now, if you know me, you know that a music score is one of the most important things I pay attention to in a film. And the score for The Brutalist fires exactly when it needs to, exactly the way that it needs to, helping the 3-hour and 20-minute film just fly by. Music score and soundtrack gets a 2. The Brutalist might not be the most exciting film. This is obviously not Infinity War or Way of the Water. But for drama of this scale, there is absolutely no point when I ever felt burdened by watching this film. If I haven't made it clear yet, this movie makes 3 hours and 20 minutes feel like an hour or more shorter than what it is. And it has to be an entertaining and very engaging movie to be able to do that. Naturally, entertainment value gets a 2. I'm sure my personal preference on this film is pretty clear by now. The Brutalist wasn't just one of the best films I saw at TIFF, it's easily one of the best films of the year. This film is a fully immersive trip back in time, where watching it is like walking through a museum showcasing the making of an artist's incredible architectural feats, the social issues of the American 40s and 50s, the flaws of people, and the story of a man trying to hold to the things he loves in America. The Brutalist is truly a remarkable achievement in cinematic storytelling, and I can't recommend this movie highly enough. It is wild how mesmerizing the entire film is from start to finish. So for that reason and every other reason that I've mentioned, The Brutalist gets 12 out of 12 for real score, 5 out of 5 stars. All right, time for our own little intermission. The next film I'm going to review relied heavily on a solid script and great acting, and the importance of these two components in filmmaking cannot be overstated. That is why it is so awesome that a filmmaker and friend of mine, Noah Salzman, started Fifth Leg Table Reads, an online platform where screenwriters and actors can come together to read and act out scripts virtually. Noah was gracious enough to invite me to one of these sessions where I got to take on the role of a scary beast.
You're sure you sensed two?
Yes, master. That time of the two is upon us.
The cavern rumbles with guttural laughter.
Tell the beasts to lick their wounds and prepare, for now is the time of the monsters.
The ground shakes with laughter as the spider scurries away.
It was so much fun to participate with. Everyone was super cool, talented, and very respectful about giving feedback. While filmmaking hubs like LA and New York have lots of table read opportunities, Fifth Leg Table Reads conveniently offers a similar experience to everyone else who might not have the same kind of film industry presence available nearby. If you're a screenwriter or actor looking to network and collab with others in the same discipline, I added a link in the description for you to follow and learn more. Man, talking about acting and screenwriting has me really excited to talk about the next film. So let's jump into that. This is my review of Nickel Boys. Elwood Curtis's college dream shatters alongside a 2-lane Florida highway. Bearing the brunt of an innocent misstep, he's sentenced to Nickel Academy, a brutal reformatory sunk deep in the Jim Crow South. He encounters another ward, Turner. The two black teens strike up an alliance, Turner dispensing fundamental tips for survival, Elwood clinging to his optimistic worldview. Despite Nickel's brutality, Elwood strives to hold on to his humanity, awakening a new version of Turner. The entire film works with fixed point-of-view perspectives. In the timeline of the main story, the camera toggles between the literal viewpoints of the two main characters. This means that the camera is an active character for most of the film, which just offers such a fascinating angle for watching the story play out. Nickel Boys just has such a creative style of cinematography that you really just have to see it to appreciate it. Visual effects and editing gets a 2. Because the filming style is so unique, the acting ends up being very unique as well. Aunjanue Ellis-Taylor, in particular, is so great at being an endearing motherly figure. There are a number of scenes where her presence just warms up the entire scene. This is such a unique viewing experience, and I think the cast played into it perfectly. Acting and casting gets a 2. When you understand the subject matter the film is tackling, you begin to realize just how dark the story could get. The themes of racism are apparent very early on in the film, but the levels of egregiousness that it reaches is unthinkable, and catching glimpses of the terror this incites is just super menacing. But that's the thing. The film does a really good job at knowing how to convey horror without needing to be overly explicit about it. It shows glimmers of the terror and leaves the rest up to the audience's own imagination, which is a very smart way to handle a subject matter like this. For the very mindful approach to racism and naturalistic terror, Stories and Themes gets 2 out of 2. What's great about Nickel Boys is that it has scenes that really stand out. The challenge, though, is in getting used to the filming style and being okay with how it toggles between perspectives and timelines. The story offers something of a twist at the end, which can be an interesting surprise or maybe a revelation you figured out early on in the film. It all depends on who you are and how you're connecting with the movie. For me, entertainment value gets a 1 out of 2. This is, though, another film where the score is on point. As with so much about this production, the score is incredibly unique and wholly tailored to this viewing experience. Because of that, music score and soundtrack gets a 2 out of 2. I really like the approach to how this story is told. It seems like the director, Ramel Ross, and the craft team came at it with the most unique angle possible. This is certainly a movie I would recommend for admiring the technical prowess, and those interested in stories about exposing the faults of American history will find much value in this one. But for me, this is a good one-time watch, so personal preference gets a 1 out of 2. Even if I'm not enamored enough with it to revisit it, it is still an astounding technical achievement in filmmaking. So we're still landing on a great score with this one. Nickel Boys gets a 10 out of 12 ForReel score, 4 out of 5 stars. As I mentioned earlier, it is award season, which means organizations that I have the privilege of being a part of are announcing the winners of their sets of awards. Members of the Cascadia Film and TV Critics Association named Sometimes I Think About Dying their best Cascadian film, and gave top honors for Best 2024 Film to Luca Guadagnino's Challengers. Meanwhile, the Seattle Film Critics Society named Rainier: A Beer Odyssey the best Pacific Northwest film this year. And with a diverse set of films winning in 21 categories, which includes The Brutalist winning Best Production Design and Nickel Boys winning Best Cinematography, the organization voted The Substance Best Picture of the Year. Both of these groups work hard to endorse the work of local journalists and film critics, support local filmmaking, and honor great films of the year. You can learn more about both of them at the links in the description. So, I wanted to fit 4 reviews into this video. In order to do that, I'm going to roll through this one pretty quickly. This is my rapid review of A Complete Unknown. The cast in this movie is probably my favorite aspect of the film. Elle Fanning, Monica Barraro, and Edward Norton turning in solid performances. But it's the always reliable Timothée Chalamet who is the standout, pulling off a believable portrayal of Bob Dylan with great vocal capacity, recapturing the magic of his music. Acting and casting gets a 2 out of 2. I don't actively listen to Bob Dylan music, but it's presented very well in this movie with great renditions from the cast. Music and score gets a 2 out of 2. It's a biopic, and if you've seen any standard biopic, then you've already seen this one too. Bob Dylan fans may gravitate to it, but anyone looking for a more compelling take on the story might be asking for too much here. Story and themes gets a 1 out of 2. The movie looks good and is well shot, but it is way too long. I needed this movie to be about 45 minutes shorter, with the music being more prominent more often. Visual effects and editing, 1 out of 2. Great acting and great music keeps the film engaging, but a basic formula and overlong runtime wore my patience thin. Entertainment value, 1 out of 2. Is this a movie I would recommend? Only to those who express an affinity for Bob Dylan. Is it something I would watch again? Honestly, probably not. Personal preference, unfortunately, 0 out of 2. Look, A Complete Unknown isn't a bad movie. I actually think it's quite well made. It's just not a movie for me, and so I just really hope that it resonates with its target audience of Bob Dylan fans. For me, it lands at a 7 out of 12 for real score, 2.5 out of 5 stars. Now, I may be mixed on the movie about Bob Dylan, but I've got to say I really like the whiskey that he endorses. This particular bottle is Decade Series 2. It's 100 proof, and it's bold and spicy whiskey. It's definitely got a little bit of a bite to it, and I imagine it would be great over ice. I like all of the Heaven's Door bottles I've tried so far, but this one at 100 proof certainly leaves an impression. So, speaking of having a bite, let's talk about a film that's more nefarious. This is my review for Nosferatu. Robert Eggers' Nosferatu is a gothic tale of obsession between a haunted young woman and the terrifying vampire infatuated with her, causing untold horror in its wake. Let me start off by explaining my history with Robert Eggers' films. I love The Witch, and I can't overstate how The Lighthouse is one of my favorite films of all time. But even though I know a lot of people who enjoy his most recent film, The Northman, it just wasn't quite for me. So, I had big expectations that Nosferatu would help restore my faith in the future of Eggers' career. Does he pull it off? Here's what I thought. This is another film with some incredible standout performances with a great ensemble cast. Let's start with the titular character here, Nosferatu, played brilliantly by Bill Skarsgård. It's easy to see that Skarsgård worked meticulously on his mannerisms for this role, with his voice having a low, deep, and unsettling tone to it, and in how he uses his physique to portray the huge, menacing presence of the character. It is very impressive, but his performance works so well because of Eggers' direction, as he's able to amplify the mysterious and terrifying aura through music, silhouettes, and camera work. And then there's Nicholas Hoult, an actor I think doesn't get enough praise for his work. Besides his role here in Nosferatu, he also has recent roles in Clint Eastwood's Juror No. 2 and Justin Kurzel's The Order. This trio of performances demonstrates Hoult's range and versatility as an actor. And while his part as Thomas Hutter in Nosferatu isn't quite as showy as his co-stars, he's still very effective with his silent and scared reactions, particularly when he first meets Orlok. But it is Lily Rose Depp who is absolutely astonishing with her visceral, physically demanding role as Ellen Hutter. Sure, maintaining the sad and depressed demeanor her character has is an acting challenge of itself, but what really makes her performance stand out are the various scenes where Ellen is convulsing and in physical agony. She deserves every bit of praise she gets for this role. This is easy. Acting and casting, 2 out of 2. The visual aspect of the film is meticulously curated. I mentioned earlier how Eggers' direction really helped aid the actors' performances, and it really is this affinity he has for shadows and silhouettes that shines through this film. So much of how this film looks is so very closely coordinated with the lighting and the camera movements. Plus, I'm a big fan of how the film is shot, often utilizing long takes and very fluid camera motions. Visual effects and editing, 2 out of 2. I think when it comes to the entertainment value, Nosferatu certainly has really interesting and engaging moments. But what surprised me about Nosferatu is how funny it can be. No, this movie is not a comedy, but there are a number of moments, many of course involving Willem Dafoe, either have a silly action or an amusing line that I found myself chuckling at. This was particularly engaging in a theater with others having the same reaction to these moments, underscoring one of the many reasons that it is great to see films like this in theaters rather than watching at home. If I was to criticize one thing though, it would probably be the pacing and length of the film. I thoroughly enjoyed watching Nosferatu, but there are lulls in the journey, moments of meandering that eventually had me wondering how far we are from the end. Eggers is moving out of the slow burn storytelling business and into more mainstream oriented filmmaking. And while I hope he continues to remain true to his filmmaking style, I'd like to see more creative ways to make audiences feel wholly invested from start to finish. Entertainment value gets 1 out of 2. So much about this movie is unsettling, and really the score is no different. The score here is great, conveying all of the terror and horror of the film in dynamic ways. This is another soundtrack I'm going to be putting on repeat for a while, so music, score, and soundtrack gets 2 out of 2. Eggers had a lot to live up to in this adaptation. Both versions of the Nosferatu story are critically acclaimed films, and when you're looking at yet another remake, I have to ask, what are you adding to it? What was added in this version is a lot of the Eggers filmmaking sensibilities that I love in most of his films. When I see an Eggers movie, I don't want an overtly horrific film. I want something that crawls under my skin and makes me really uneasy while I'm watching it. Nosferatu does that for me in a way that The Northman did not, and having his touch on this story was well worth the retelling. Story and themes gets 2 out of 2. Immediately after watching the film, I shared my reaction on Twitter, saying, Nosferatu is in the upper echelons of Robert Eggers' filmmaking, and I still hold to that. On top of the praise I give this film for its acting performances, its score, and its visual aesthetic, there are so many other technical aspects that really stand out in this film, like the highly detailed set design and the elaborate costume design. I am still comfortably seated on the Eggers train, and Nosferatu continues to demonstrate why I gravitate to his style of filmmaking and storytelling. All that said, personal preference gets 2 out of 2. Nosferatu is a stunning achievement in Gothic cinematic storytelling. Eggers has proven once again that he is a master of crafting haunting stories that really crawl under your skin. And for all of these reasons, Nosferatu completely earns 11 out of 12 ForReel score, 4.5 out of 5 stars. Whew, that was a lot to get through, but thank you for tuning in and watching Real Buzzed. If you like what you see here and you want to see more from me and my awesome team of writers and content creators, you can head over to thisisforreal.com for all of our content and everything we're posting. This is Real Buzzed. Be wise, drink responsibly, and if you like this video and you want to see more, be sure to hit like and subscribe.